Hello, friends! I am glad to see you again. Today I'm going to tell you about the HOA that rented out my warehouse. So I'm the sort of guy who double locks every door, numbers every storage shelf, and keeps a laminated inventory pasted to the inside of my metal-framed clipboard. My warehouse, an old brick carriage barn I'd converted to store stage lighting gear for touring bands, sits at the far end of a cul-de-sac in one of those master-planned communities where lawns have to be exactly 3 inches tall and paint colors come from a pre-approved palette named after various kinds of oatmeal. I bought the place years before the subdivision swallowed it, and when the new houses arrived, an HOA followed like ants on a dropped popsicle. The HOA's current president is a man called Mortimer, tall, pear-shaped, partial to polo shirts embroidered with his initials, and he lives 3 doors down from me. Up until this story began, our interactions were mostly him reminding me to maintain neighborhood aesthetics, and me smiling while mentally picturing his golf cart rolling into the retention pond. Last month, I took a 3-day job in another city, rigging trusses for a festival. I left at dawn on a Wednesday. Calendar cleared, warehouse locked, alarms engaged, inventory sealed. The only person who knew the exact travel schedule was my brother Jasper, and he was on the crew with me. By all logic, nothing should have happened back home. And wow, was that logic ever off the mark. Wednesday night, midway through loading an LED wall onto a flatbed, my phone pinged. It was a motion alert from the warehouse camera system. That wasn't unusual. A stray cat sometimes cut across the sensor. I glanced, saw nothing, and dismissed it. Thursday morning, same thing, except this time the thumbnail preview showed headlights in the driveway. I tapped live view. The feed buffered in the lousy stadium Wi-Fi and then popped up. A white box truck reversing toward my roll-up door. 2 men hopped out and began muscling plastic folding tables down a ramp. They moved like they'd done it before. Efficient. Practiced. My first assumption was they'd got the wrong address, but the code-locked door slid open far too easily. Somebody had the access code. I felt the flush of a 1,000-degree head rush and tried calling the on-site number printed on the truck. Straight to voicemail. I texted Mortimer. Group chat he insists all residents use for community continuity. No reply. Jasper saw my jaw grinding and pulled me aside. We watched another feed, the men arranging tables in neat rows down the center aisle, right where my dimmer racks usually wait for their next tour. They unlocked the side office too, unlocking, not forcing it. They knew the keypad pattern. Every instinct said jump in the rental van and drive 6 hours back. But the festival was on a crazy tight schedule, and my company would have been fined into oblivion if the rigging team bailed. I told myself I'd survive 1 more day and then bolt. I phoned the local sheriff's non-emergency line. The dispatcher said she'd send a patrol to look around. 10 minutes later, she called back and said the deputy found no sign of illegal entry, and the doors appeared undamaged. She added a note about possible tenant move-in. Tenant? I felt like screaming. That night I hardly slept. I kept refreshing the camera feed. More vehicles came. A slate gray SUV, a couple of compacts, even a kid on a bike who propped open the walk-in door like he owned the place. By midnight, the lights inside were blazing and people were milling between the folding tables, sipping from disposable cups. They were examining my moving blankets as though they were drapes. One guy drummed fingers on a road case stenciled with a Grammy winner's name and set a slice of pepperoni pizza on top of it. I watched cheese oil seep into the foam seal. It felt like someone keyed my car in slow motion. Friday morning, the festival promoter announced thunderstorms would force an early shutdown. For once, bad weather was a personal gift. We could load out immediately and head home. Jasper volunteered to drive through the night while I nursed coffee and obsession in the passenger seat, my tablet glowing with the security feed. At 3:27 a.m., the people finally left. 2 left their trash behind. 1 rolled a dolly stacked with small boxes I didn't recognize. The padlock clicked, lights out. Dawn broke pink as we crossed county lines. Exhaustion smeared the horizon, but adrenaline kept me wired. We squealed into my driveway just after 7. The box truck was gone. So was the SUV. Only a scattering of tire tracks and a half-deflated Mylar balloon shaped like the number 8 remained, bobbing sadly against my mailbox. Inside, the smell hit first, cheap cologne mixed with reheated marinara. Someone had attempted to freshen up using vanilla plugins, creating a nauseating cloud. The folding tables were stacked near the dock door, each labeled with masking tape. Vendor 1, Vendor 2, and so on. On my desk was a handwritten sign reading, "Return keys to Darla." That was my next-door neighbor. She's friendly in a saccharine way, always calling me sweetie while hinting I should activate the potential of my property. Darla also happens to be the chair of the HOA events committee. I found my inventory sheets yanked from their clip and stuffed into a banker's box. Several items were circled in red. Too big, block walkway, looks dangerous. My forklift's master switch was off. The battery clamps had been loosened. Someone had tried to figure out how it worked and given up. I powered up my laptop and scanned the event logs. The smart lock recorded a new code named HOA Vendor Access, created at 9:03 a.m. on Wednesday, 6 hours after I left town. Mortimer's administrator credentials. I pulled the camera archives, Darla standing at the keypad, Mortimer beside her, both wearing matching maroon polos embroidered with a looping HOA logo. They'd brought a mobile credit card reader and were charging entrance fees, a makeshift craft fair inside my building while I was gone. Jasper whistled low. That's ballsy even for neighborhood busybodies. I phoned Darla, straight to voicemail. I phoned Mortimer. Rings, then he answered with faux cheer. Good morning, neighbor. How may I serve? You rented out my warehouse, I said, voice calm, almost gentle, the way TNT looks inert until a spark. Oh, a pause, papers shuffling. We did make productive use of that underutilized structure, yes, but I assure you the HOA board voted. I never got a ballot. It was an emergency action under Article 9, subsection B. He cleared his throat. Authority to requisition shared spaces for community enrichment. It's not a shared space, I said. It's titled solely in my name. Mortimer, you broke in. You'll find no damage, he retorted. We merely used the code and we cleaned after. I scanned a sticky marinara splash on the epoxy floor. We'll talk later, I said, and hung up before the rage cracked my composure. Part of me wanted to call the cops right then, but instinct said gather evidence first, think strategically. I took photos of every scuff, every trash pile, every unplugged cable. Jasper helped me lift a tarp off my mixing console. Sauce splatters on the faders. We documented that too. Then I opened the floor drains and sprayed a disinfectant mist like a hazmat crew, airing out the stench. By mid-afternoon, I'd calmed enough to visit the county clerk's office. Copies of deeds, bylaws, HOA charters, $5 each. I fed the Xerox machine until my folder bulged. Sure enough, the HOA's emergency powers applied only to common elements defined as sidewalks, pools, and recreation fields. Private commercial buildings were off limits. Mortimer's big mistake was believing his badge-shaped name tag trumped property law. On my way home, I swung by a print shop and ordered an enormous vinyl banner in highway flashing neon. Trespassers will be prosecuted. No HOA access. I booked a locksmith to repin every cylinder, replaced the electronic keypad with a standalone cellular model, and set the alarm to page both me and Jasper if anyone so much as sneezed near the perimeter. Around dinner time, Darla finally returned my call. Sweetie, she began, you're being very negative. The Artisan Bazaar was a huge success. We raised nearly $2,000 for fountain repairs. By charging vendors rent, she laughed lightly. Well, we facilitated commerce, a win-win. Your warehouse got exposure and the community thrived. You didn't have permission. You weren't here to ask, she said, tone turning brittle. Anyway, Mortimer said he'd explain the paperwork. Darla, I said, what you two did is burglary and criminal trespass, and whoever sold tickets inside committed commercial exploitation without a license. The health department might also care that you served food. Did your vendors have permits? Silence, then a shaky exhale. Let's not escalate. We can discuss an amicable arrangement. There's going to be a discussion, I agreed, but not the one you think. I hung up. Jasper, who'd listened on speaker, raised an eyebrow. You planning nuclear or surgical? Both, I said. First step, calculate damages. Anything sticky, stained, or tampered with would be professionally cleaned or replaced. That Grammy-stenciled road case alone cost $2,000. The mixing console faders would need recapping. My forklift battery warranty might be void if the clamps sparked. I tallied numbers on a spreadsheet until the total made even me gulp. Then I added a line item for emotional distress. Couldn't hurt when negotiating. Second step, identify every vendor. The camera feed had captured license plates. I cross-referenced timestamps with the credit card reader logs I'd found in Mortimer's Dropbox folder. Yes, he'd reused the same password for everything. Turned out the fair wasn't just knit scarves and scented candles. There was a lightly used electronics table and a vintage spirits booth pouring sample shots. Some vendors were local resellers who'd shown up at other pop-up markets without proper state resale certificates. The kind of folks the Department of Revenue loves to audit. Third step, talk to my neighbor 2 streets over, Hank, a retired county health inspector who misses his badge. Hank delights in consulting for friends. I brought him a home-baked pecan pie and asked how many code citations a craft fair could rack up for lack of food service hand-washing stations. Hank's eyes sparkled like kids at fireworks. While Hank drafted a letter, I drafted one too, addressed to Mortimer and Darla, CC'd to every board member. I itemized damages, referenced statutes, and set a 10-day clock to settle or face a civil suit. I also pointed out that unauthorized subleasing of private property could void their directors' and officers' insurance, meaning personal liability. My closing sentence: you may construe this as your sole courtesy notice prior to formal filing. I printed the letter on thick ivory stationery, the kind that thuds authoritatively when it lands. Jasper and I strolled to Mortimer's porch that evening. His porch light flickered on, and he opened the door in pajama pants and slippers shaped like cartoon bulldogs. I didn't say a word. I just handed him the envelope. Jasper handed him a flash drive containing footage of the unauthorized fair, labeled Evidence #1. Mortimer paled. Across the street, Darla peered through blinds. I waved. Her blinds snapped shut. Back home, I cracked a cola and raised the can in a toast. Jasper clinked his root beer. To swift justice, he said. Not swift, I replied. Strategic. Tomorrow I start phase 2. He grinned. I'll bring popcorn. That night, the motion sensors stayed mercifully quiet. But my mind buzzed with plans. Contacting the county zoning board about unpermitted events, alerting the state tax authority about cash transactions, offering displaced vendors a legal path to reimburse me for cleaning costs in exchange for reduced exposure. And somewhere in the middle of those thoughts, another plot thread appeared. One involving Mortimer's pet project, an HOA-funded sculpture garden slated for the greenbelt behind my warehouse. I recalled hearing rumors that the purchase order hadn't cleared environmental review. I opened my laptop and queued some public records requests. I finally slept around 3 a.m., dreams swirling with legal citations and folding tables morphing into dollar signs. When sunlight cracked through the blinds, I felt surprisingly calm. The dominoes were lined up. All I had to do was tip the first one. Before I could, though, fate shoved a new piece onto the board. At 8:30 sharp, a squad car rolled into my driveway. Deputy Alvarez, same officer who dismissed my initial call, climbed out looking apologetic. Got a complaint about a hazardous structure, she said, eyes scanning the warehouse. From whom? I asked, though I could guess. Anonymous tip, she sighed. Obliged to inspect for code violations. She read from her tablet. Alleged unpermitted electrical work, improper storage of flammable materials, blocked egress. I almost laughed. Those were precisely the issues I'd cited in my letter about the HOA's bazaar. Somebody was trying preemptive retaliation. I unlocked the warehouse, invited her in, showed fresh inspection stickers, MSDS sheets neatly filed, breakers labeled. Jasper demoed how the fire suppression system self-tests weekly. Alvarez could find nothing wrong. She even complimented the cleanliness. I offered her a bottled water and she accepted, shaking her head. Some neighbors, she muttered, need hobbies. As she left, Mortimer's golf cart appeared at the corner. He spotted the squad car and swerved back the way he came. His cowardice fueled my resolve. He wanted to escalate? Fine. I'd bring the full weight of lawful consequences. But first I had to attend the monthly HOA meeting, scheduled for that evening in the clubhouse. Normally I skip those love fests, but tonight I'd be front row center, with Hank the retired inspector at my side and a projector full of incriminating video clips. I spent the afternoon rehearsing my speech, trimming the video to the juiciest bits. Darla collecting booth fees in cash, Mortimer unlocking my door, vendors spooning pasta over open sterno flames. My phone buzzed repeatedly with unknown numbers, no doubt vendors fearing backlash. But I let them go to voicemail. I'd call them back after the meeting, once leverage was established. At 6:30, I donned a crisp shirt and rolled the projector under my arm. Jasper wore a tie for the first time in years. Hank arrived with a briefcase and a grin. We looked like a legal hit squad. The clubhouse parking lot overflowed. Word had spread that something juicy was going down. Residents clustered in whispering knots. Mortimer stood at the lectern, face blotchy. Darla perched beside him, cheeks flushed. When I walked in, the room hushed the way a bar quiets when a rookie cop enters. I set the projector on a side table, plugged it into a wall outlet, and waited until Mortimer began the agenda. After 5 minutes of banal reports, he cleared his throat. Next item, concerns regarding misuse of community resources. That's my cue, I said loudly. Heads turned, I stepped forward, handed Mortimer a thumb drive. Play this, please. He fumbled, but Jasper reached over and tapped the space bar. The screen lit up with the security cam angle of Mortimer himself punching in my keypad code. Gasps rippled. Darla's painted smile faded as the footage rolled on. Vendors unpacking, people exchanging cash, Darla's voice squeaking, $10 entry. When the clip ended, I faced the room. That's my privately owned warehouse, I said. The HOA president and events chair broke in, sublet space, and hosted an unlicensed event while I was out of town. Damages exceed $24,000. I gave them 10 days to resolve this. As of now, day 3, they've responded by calling code enforcement on me. I gestured toward Deputy Alvarez, who'd shown up out of curiosity and now stood at the back. A murmur swelled, outrage, disbelief, and from a few, schadenfreude. Hank cleared his throat and cited county ordinance numbers. Deputy Alvarez confirmed my facility looked spotless. I passed around printed photos of the mess they'd left. Mortimer tried to speak, but the treasurer cut him off. "Did you authorize this on behalf of the board?" he demanded. Mortimer opened and closed his mouth like a trout. Darla piped up, "We believed it was for the community good." A resident in the third row shouted, "You charged me $15 just to browse macrame purses." The room exploded in argument. I stepped back, content to let them eat their own, but I still had one final detail. When the noise subsided, I said, given the conflict of interest and potential liability, I moved to suspend Mortimer and Darla from their positions pending independent review. The treasurer, sensing a lifeline away from a lawsuit, seconded. A quick show of hands. Motion carried overwhelmingly. Mortimer's face drained. Darla looked like she might faint. The meeting adjourned in chaos. I packed my projector, thanked Hank and Jasper, and walked out into the muggy night air feeling lighter than I had in days. Phase 2 was complete. Phase 3 started the very next sunrise, kicked off by the guttural roar of a dumpster truck in Mortimer's driveway. I was sipping black coffee on my porch when the truck eased its steel jaws around an overstuffed container bearing the HOA logo. A worker in a fluorescent vest hauled out a bundle of folders, spreadsheets fluttering like confetti in the breeze. From a respectful distance, I saw letterhead that clearly read, "Sculpture Garden Phase Budget." The timing couldn't have been more poetic. Evidently, someone on the newly indignant board had ordered an emergency document purge, and the waste company came earlier than expected. I ambled over, phone camera rolling. "Mind if I take a quick peek?" I asked the worker, explaining I was the board's compliance liaison. That title was brand new. I'd been voted in by email at midnight after half the community binge-watched my security footage. The worker shrugged. I snapped photos of purchase orders, contractor invoices, check stubs with Mortimer's handwriting, all dated weeks before the HOA had publicly announced any art project. By 9 o'clock, I had enough breadcrumbs to bake a very incriminating loaf. First call, County Office of Fiscal Ethics. I forwarded scanned documents, highlighting entries where vendor names and addresses didn't match any registered businesses. Second call, an old college friend, Annie, now an accountant specializing in nonprofit fraud. She owed me a favor for wiring a concert venue last minute. She agreed to pour over the digital pile. While Annie crunched numbers, I drafted polite invitations to every vendor who'd occupied my warehouse tables. Using publicly available DMV data and the blurry license plate images, I matched each plate to a name and address. Then I composed identical letters, cordial, professional, but unmistakably firm. Dear vendor, on May 15th, my privately owned warehouse was used for an unlicensed marketplace. Your booth was recorded selling merchandise therein. Local authorities are investigating. If you voluntarily remit $750 to offset damages and cleaning costs, I will provide written confirmation that you acted under false pretenses and will not pursue further claims. If I do not receive payment within 10 days, you may be named in civil filings. Cordially, me. I mailed the Stack certified return receipt. That afternoon, I took Hank for barbecue to celebrate preliminary victories. Mid-rib bite, he said, "Heard Mortimer tried to withdraw $5,000 from the HOA Capital Reserve. Bank flagged it. Fraud alert, maybe?" He winked. I had an idea. The upcoming Saturday was the HOA Summer Jamboree, a potluck traditionally held on the common lawn. The board, minus Mortimer and Darla, Decided the event should proceed as a morale booster, with me handling logistics. Perfect stage for Phase 3's finale. I spent Thursday and Friday converting this plan into reality. Mobile projection, rig my own equipment, paired with a daylight viewable screen big enough to shame a drive-in theater. Guest speaker Annie, the accountant, willing to present her findings. Official presence Deputy Alvarez and a county revenue agent named Mr. Bartlett both accepted open invites to address compliance questions. Food vendor. My cousin Ria's taco truck, fully licensed, 100% compliant, giving free plates to residents who brought canned good donations for the food pantry. Optics matter. Saturday dawned bright and sticky. By noon, the greenbelt buzzed with picnic blankets and folding chairs. Mortimer was nowhere in sight. Darla skulked behind a hedge, sunglasses huge as ski goggles. At 1:30, the treasurer gave a short welcome speech and handed me the cordless mic. "Thanks, folks," I began, voice calm, almost conversational. "Our neighborhood has had an eventful week. A lot of questions about budgets, permissions, and who holds the keys, literally and figuratively. So today we'll clear the fog." I gestured to the screen. Annie clicked her remote and a spreadsheet appeared. Rows of vendor names, dates, and payment amounts. "Funds earmarked for a sculpture garden," she said, "were redirected to accounts associated with a shell entity called Community Enhancement Partners. That entity traces to a single signatory, M. Mortimer." Gasps. Someone in the crowd muttered, "Knew it." Annie advanced slides, copies of checks, invoices for landscaping equipment never delivered, and the clandestine document dump I'd photographed. Then Deputy Alvarez stepped forward. She reminded everyone that misappropriating HOA money could constitute theft, a Class D felony once thresholds crossed. Her badge gleamed in the sun. Her tone stayed friendly but firm. Mr. Bartlett followed, speaking of sales tax discrepancies and penalties for unlicensed alcohol sales. He stated matter-of-factly that several vendors from the illicit craft fair already mailed settlements, 4 checks totaling $3,000. Applause rippled. Finally, I took the mic back. "The damage tally to my warehouse stands at $26,311, including cleaning, lost rental revenue, and equipment repair. The HOA insurance carrier has agreed to cover the cost provided the board subrogates against the individuals who authorized the break-in." I let that sink in. Head swiveled toward Darla's hedge. She tried to shrink deeper. "Additionally," I said, "the board has scheduled a special election next month. Vacancies need filling." I smiled. "I'm sponsoring a workshop on fiduciary duty next Tuesday. Free pizza." The crowd laughed, the tension discharged like summer thunder hitting open ground. Children resumed chasing bubbles. Ria's tacos perfumed the air. Phase 3, personnel shakeup, was effectively done. But stories rarely end clean. Monday morning, my phone lit with a call from Mortimer's number. I answered on speaker while soldering a dimmer pack. "Legal harassment," he began without greeting. "Intimidation. I never stole anything. The vendor money went toward down payments for the community's benefit." "Mortimer," I said, wiping flux from my fingers, "take a breath. You violated the bylaws, breached my security, and mishandled funds. Your best move is cooperation." He ranted about witch hunts and cancel culture, phrases he'd obviously lifted from talk radio. Then, dropping his voice, he tried a threat. "I know inspectors can find problems anywhere. Might be you'll wish you'd stayed quiet." I muted the mic, laughed soundlessly, unmuted. "Funny you mention inspections," I said. "The fire marshal is coming Thursday for a courtesy walkthrough. I invited him. You're welcome to join." "Oh wait, restraining order might complicate that." Click, he ended the call. Thursday, the fire marshal found 0 deficiencies and commended my wiring. I framed the report and hung it by the office door. The restraining order, however, wasn't a bluff. After Mortimer's call, I'd filed for a civil protective order citing trespass, intimidation, and potential retaliation. Judge Whitcomb, whose daughter's indie band once rented my rehearsal stage, granted a temporary order on the spot. Mortimer now had to stay at least 100 yards from me and my property. That distance included HOA meetings, effectively sidelining him until the permanent hearing. Meanwhile, Darla tried salvaging her reputation. She slid apology notes under doors, baked lemon squares for everyone on the cul-de-sac, and posted a long message on the neighborhood app about forgiveness and moving forward. But the smell of marinara in my cables wasn't so easily scrubbed from memory. A week later, Annie forwarded me a terse email from Mortimer's attorney. A settlement offer. It proposed that Mortimer and Darla jointly pay $15,000 in exchange for my dropping personal claims, and writing a neutral statement to the sheriff recommending diversion instead of prosecution. HOA insurance would cover the remaining $11,000 and waive subrogation, meaning they wouldn't attempt to claw the money back from either party. I weighed the offer carefully. The numbers covered all damages plus a bit for my trouble. More importantly, the HOA kept its reserve fund intact, sparing innocent neighbors a massive special assessment. I countered, raise the personal share to $18,000 and Mortimer must resign from the HOA permanently, forfeiting any future committee roles. Darla would step down for at least 2 years. Both must issue public apologies via certified letter to every resident and reimburse me $600 for future deep cleaning of the mixing console should sauce odor reappear. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. By Friday, the attorney accepted. Checks arrived by certified mail the next Wednesday. Mortimer's letter read as though chewed by lawyers, but it contained the magic words, unlawful entry, violation of fiduciary duty, and regret. Darla's letter was more heartfelt. She blamed peer pressure and vowed to volunteer at the public library. As part of wrapping things up, I hosted a community open house at the warehouse, this time fully authorized. Neighbors toured the rows of lighting rigs, tried on headsets, and watched Jasper program a light show synced to classic rock riffs. Kids squealed, parents grinned, and not a single person placed pizza on a road case. Respect earned. The Saturday after that, a moving truck appeared in front of Mortimer's house. He'd decided, rumor said, to relocate closer to a sibling across state lines. Standing by my mailbox, I noted that the golf cart went up the ramp last. No pond swan dive for it, but poetic enough that the cart left the neighborhood the same way it had ruled it. Slow, self-important, and slightly lopsided. Epilogue details moved swiftly. The special election filled Mortimer's vacancy with Elaine, a retired nurse known for her patience and ironclad integrity. The sculpture garden project was shelved. Funds were redirected to repairing the aging playground. Vendors who paid the $750 fee received formal releases. Those who didn't were listed by name in a small claims filing. Most settled the moment papers hit their mailboxes. Deputy Alvarez dropped by during loadouts occasionally, now off-duty and smiling, glad to see peace restored. She never once mentioned anonymous complaints again. As for my warehouse, it gained a mild notoriety. Musicians told each other, "That place is Fort Knox, book it." I raised rental rates 10% and hardly felt guilty. Late one evening, months later, Jasper and I sat on the loading dock, cicadas buzzing. He lifted a soda can. "Here's to crappy marinara, the most profitable condiment in town." I clinked my root beer against his. "To boundaries," I said, "and the fun of enforcing them." We drank in comfortable silence, warehouse lights glowing behind us like an oversized victory torch. The cul-de-sac was quiet, lawns evenly trimmed, porch lights warm and steady. Exactly the picture the HOA always wanted, achieved at last through, ironically, the upheaval it had caused. I glanced at the new keypad, numbers lit blue. The code was known only to me, Jasper, and my insurance adjuster. If the HOA ever needed space for another bazaar, they'd have to rent the community center like everyone else, or ask politely with a signed contract and hefty deposit. I stood, stretched, and shut the dock door with a satisfying metallic thunk. Security bolts slid home. Phase 3 was done, and so was the tale worth telling. Except maybe for the footnote that I now possess a lawyer on speed dial and a reputation no neighbor will test again. "Ready to call it a night?" Jasper asked. "Yeah," I said, flicking off the last light. Story's over. 3 seasons slipped by before karma tugged at one last thread. A docket notice landed in my mailbox. State v. Mortimer. Trespass and theft, with me as primary witness. I prepped a vivid impact statement, then cleared my head on a neighborhood walk. Everything looked wholesome until I caught 2 teens spray painting my warehouse wall. Instead of calling the cops, I made them scrub the mess and pitch a legit mural for the HOA. They agreed, pizza included. Momentum swung our way. The new board, led by level-headed Elaine, planned a winter craft and music market, this time with permits and insurance. While I tightened evidence for court, our accountant friend Annie pegged Mortimer's squirrely bookkeeping at $47 K. On hearing day, he pled guilty, paid restitution, nabbed a $5 K fine, and got 120 hours of community service grunt work. 3 days before the market, a nitpicky insurance adjuster tried depreciating my sauce-stained mixing console. Jasper fired up a haze machine. The warehouse gleamed. Teen artist Owen measured his wall, and the adjuster caved, full payout plus an odor control bonus. I ordered a new truss motor system on the spot. The winter market sparkled, legal vendors, live bluegrass, Owen's mural proclaiming community works best when you turn the right way. We raised $9,000 for EMT scholarships while Mortimer, in an orange vest, power washed the community sign across the street. Spring brought dogwood blooms. The mural became a landmark, and even Darla redeemed herself running a literacy drive. Now Jasper and I sit on the roof, satellites drifting overhead, content to let Phase 5, peace, play out in quiet satisfaction. Friends, thank you. See you soon.